Nobody knows the system better than me. Which is why I alone can fix it.
Remember when Superman ran for president? They do. The people in that audience do. It was just 2 years ago when Superman ran for president and said things like, I alone can fix it. No presidential candidate had ever said that before because they all knew that the truth that the news media always forgets, which is that the president is not Superman. The president is not a king, especially when it comes to domestic governance. The truth of the job is that the president has to do some variation of begging the Congress to get them to do what the president wants them to do, but that's not what Donald Trump's voters voted for. They voted for the guy who could fix it all alone. Remember all those times on the campaign trail when Donald Trump said he couldn't fix anything without the Democrats. He couldn't fix it without Nancy Pelosi's help or Chuck Schumer's help. Nah, he never told his voters that, but that's what he's telling them now.
We have come up with a lot of solutions, but we have Democrats that don't want to approve anything because that's probably, they think, bad for the election that's coming up. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people suffering, and that's unfortunate.
One of those many Republican solutions went down to defeat today in the House of Representatives that's controlled by Republicans. The most extreme Trumpists in the Republican House offered an immigration bill that got only 193 votes when it needed 218. 41 Republicans voted against it. Republicans didn't need any Democratic votes to pass it, but they still couldn't do it. Joining us now, Norm Orenstein, a leading congressional scholar and co-author of the book One Nation After Trump. Also with us, Jason Johnson, politics editor at theroot.com and an MSNBC contributor. Norm, I alone can do it. Turns out to be today, I really need Nancy Pelosi's help.
Well, you know, there's a level of ignorance there about how the system works, Lawrence, but it's the mendacity that really gets to me. Because, of course, as he was talking about all the solutions and the Democrats wouldn't come up with anything and we have to work together, it takes me back, of course, to that famous meeting in the Oval Office with the bipartisan bill with broad support from the Senate, with Tim Kaine and Jeff Flake and Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer there, when the president blew up that bill and very famously talked about the S-hole countries. And later on, of course, another person who was there, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Christian Nielsen, lied about what he said when she testified in front of the Senate. So we know that there's a workable way to do this, but this guy couldn't make anything work, whether it's with Republicans alone or in a bipartisan fashion.
Jason, the First Lady went to Texas, which was a great thing for her to do. She visited with a very, very small number of kids. She said exactly 13 words about the kids in a statement written for her by the staff and issued by the staff. It says, the children were eager to learn and were kind and in good spirits. In that same statement, she said 3 times as much about the Congress and, in effect, the Democrats. It is my hope that members of Congress will finally reach across the aisle and work together to solve this problem with common sense immigration reform that secures our borders and keeps families together. And so there's Melania Trump saying we've got to reach across the aisle to those Democrats to get this done.
You know, it's interesting. You can literally see Trump over her shoulder just dictating these messages when you hear these things from Melania. This is the thing that always amazes me, Lawrence. And we've heard this from this president. We know he lies. We know he's incapable in lots of different ways. The most important power that any president has, you can ask any political scientist, you can ask any consultant, is persuasion. And this guy promised he could persuade anybody. He said, I can make the best deals. I can get everybody to work together. But once he's in office, he's realized that his obnoxious behavior, his bluster, his lying, not only to his own party, but the Democrats, nobody wants to cut a deal with him. And it's certainly not an election year. So Melania can say so, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders can say so, but if Trump can't cut a deal, he's not going to get anything done. But instead, he blames the Democrats.
And Norm, the president clearly does not know, since he never paid attention to this, that there's no rule that says you are not allowed to pass a bill in the House that might not pass the Senate. And in fact, many times in our history, one body or the other passed a bill knowing that the other body wasn't ready to pass it, but they passed the bill in order to put pressure on the other body, in order to force them into a vote. Because if you never force some of these Democrats, for example, like Joe Manchin in West Virginia, where Trump is very popular, if you never force him in the Senate to cast a vote on this for or against the president, then you're not testing what you can actually accomplish.
Absolutely. And of course, Lawrence, both of us have been around the Hill long enough to know that there are dozens and dozens of such efforts by the House against the Senate and the Senate against the House. I think what's most important here, though, and we need to turn the focus a little bit away from Trump and towards Paul Ryan and the Republicans in the House. We had a discharge petition, an attempt by, I won't call them moderate Republicans because there are no such people other than Charlie Dent in the House, but the more scared ones and the less extreme ones, to get a bill onto the floor that was going to pass with more Democrats than Republicans. What Paul Ryan did instead was to push them away from that. And what's been called a compromise bill, this just drives me nuts, a compromise that involves the nutcase radical Republicans trying to compromise with the anti-immigration but not quite so crazy Republicans, is no compromise at all. It was an attempt to shut out the other party, and they still couldn't do it with their votes alone.
And Jason, Paul Ryan's predecessor was willing every once in a while to let a vote go to the floor, right, where he knew the way this thing is going to pass is Democrats are going to vote for it.
Right. And even Boehner played these games, though. There were bills,
he did.
You know, where he was like, well, I'm not even going to bring this to the floor. And Obama would say, hey, just bring the bill to the floor. Everyone knows that negotiation. I think, look, Paul Ryan's almost asleep at the wheel at this particular point. He knows he's not running again. His leadership has already been sort of weakened for years. But this is the ineffectiveness of this Congress. The leadership on Republicans on both sides, they have not prepared for this. They don't have a plan. And until they get some direction from the president, they don't know what to do.
Norm, in campaign terms, the president was out there saying, I alone can do it. Now he's very clearly telling his people he can't. He absolutely cannot do it, that he needs Nancy Pelosi. He needs Chuck Schumer. That has to have a surprising sound to it for the Trump voters who believed that he alone could do it.
Well, fortunately for him, he's got Sean Hannity and others who will try and convert this into something that they will be willing to believe. But I think the fact is most voters out there, other than that core of people who are going to be with Trump no matter what, are going to see what's happening and are going to be appalled by it. And what they're going to see, and this is what frightens Republicans in the House and Senate, that they can't make it work and they've got the reins of power. And they're going to face it in November.
Norm Orenstein and Jason Johnson, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Right, Lawrence.
When we come back,